always thought my husband and I shared everything. Every silly joke, every little worry, and every dream. We knew each other's quirks and flaws, celebrated our victories together, and helped each other through rough patches. At least, that's what I believed until Christmas Day, when everything I thought I knew came crashing down around me. Andrea, I need to tell you something, Sean said, his fingers drumming nervously on our kitchen counter. My boss called. He needs me to handle an emergency client situation in Boston. I looked up from my coffee, studying his face. There was something different in his expression. A flicker of guilt, anxiety. During Christmas? My eyes widened. I know. I tried to get out of it, but... He ran his hand through his dark hair, a gesture I'd grown to love over our 3 years of marriage. The clients threatening to pull their entire account. You've never had to travel on Christmas before. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, seeking warmth. Couldn't someone else handle it? Trust me, I wish there was. His eyes met mine, then quickly darted away. I'll make it up to you, I promise. We'll have our own Christmas when I get back. Well, I guess duty calls. I forced a smile, though disappointment settled heavy in my chest. When are you leaving? Tonight. I'm so sorry, honey. I nodded, fighting back tears. It was going to be our first Christmas apart since we'd met. That evening, as I helped Sean pack, memories of our life together flooded my mind. I remembered our wedding day, how his eyes lit up when I walked down the aisle, and the way he surprised me with weekend getaways. How he worked extra hours at the consulting firm to save for our dream house, the Victorian with the wraparound porch we'd been eyeing. Remember our first Christmas? I asked, folding his sweater. When you nearly burned down our apartment trying to make a roast turkey. He laughed. How could I forget? The fire department wasn't too happy about that 3 a.m. call. And last Christmas, when you got us those matching ugly sweaters? You still wore yours to work, because you dared me to. I tossed a sock at him, and he caught it with a grin. The office still hasn't let me live it down. His smile faded slightly. I'm so sorry about this trip, darling. I know. I sat on the edge of the bed. It's just, Christmas won't be the same without you. He sat beside me, taking my hand. Promise you won't open your presents until I'm back? Cross my heart. I leaned against his shoulder. Promise you'll call? Every chance I get. I love you. Love you too. As I watched him drive away, something nagged at the back of my mind, but I pushed the thought away. This was Sean, after all. My Sean. The man who brought me soup when I was sick and danced with me in the rain, and the man I trusted more than anyone in the world. Christmas Eve arrived, bringing with it a blanket of snow and an emptiness I couldn't shake. The house felt too quiet and too still. I'd spent the day baking cookies alone, watching Christmas movies alone, and wrapping last-minute gifts alone. Around 9 p.m., my phone lit up with Sean's call. My heart leaped. "Merry Christmas, beautiful," he said, his voice oddly strained. "Merry Christmas. How's Boston? Did you get the client situation sorted out?" It's, good. Listen, I can't really talk right now. I have to go." In the background, I heard what sounded like dishes clinking, muffled voices, and laughter. "Are you at dinner? This late? I thought you had meetings?" "I have to go," he practically shouted. "Emergency meeting." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking. Emergency meeting? At 9 p.m. On Christmas Eve? With restaurant noises in the background? None of it made sense. Then I remembered my fitness tracker. I'd left it in his car last weekend after our grocery run. With trembling fingers, I opened the app on my phone. The location pointer blinked back at me, mocking my trust. Sean's car wasn't in Boston. It was parked at a hotel right in our city, less than 15 minutes from our house. My world stopped spinning for a moment. Then everything rushed back in a tornado of thoughts. A hotel? In our city? On Christmas Eve? My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Was he meeting someone? Had our entire marriage been a lie? The signs had been there. The nervous behavior, the quick departure, and the strange phone call. "No," I whispered to myself. No. Without thinking twice, I raced to my car and headed straight to the hotel. The drive passed in a blur of tears and terrible scenarios. Every red light felt like torture. Every second that ticked by was another moment my imagination ran wild with possibilities I couldn't bear to consider. Sure enough, there sat Sean's silver car, right in the parking lot when I arrived. The sight of it, The car I'd helped him pick out, the car we'd taken on countless road trips, made my stomach churn. My hands shook as I marched into the lobby, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Christmas music played softly in the background, like a cruel mockery. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Can I help you?" I pulled out my phone, bringing up a photo of Sean and me from last summer's beach trip. My thumb brushed across his smiling face. "This man is my husband. Which room is he in?" She hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm not supposed to." "Please, I need to know. He told me he was in Boston, but his car is right outside. Please, I have to know what's going on." Something in my expression must have moved her. Maybe it was the tears I couldn't hold back, or maybe she'd seen this scene play out before. She typed something into her computer, glancing at my phone again. "Room 412, she said and slid a key card across the counter. "But miss, sometimes things aren't what they seem." I barely heard her last words as I rushed toward the elevator. The elevator ride felt eternal. Each floor dinged past like a countdown to disaster. When I finally reached the 4th floor, I ran down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the carpet. "Room 412. I didn't knock. Just swiped the key card and burst in. "Sean, how could you?" The words died in my throat. There was Sean, standing beside a wheelchair. And in that wheelchair sat a man with silver-streaked hair and familiar eyes. Eyes I hadn't seen since I was 5 years old. Eyes that had once watched me take my first steps, had crinkled at the corners when he laughed at my jokes, and had filled with tears the day he left. "Daddy?" The word came out as a whisper, a prayer, and a question I'd been asking for 26 years. "Andrea!" My father's voice trembled. My little girl. Time seemed to freeze as memories crashed over me. Mom burning all his letters after the divorce, moving us across the country, and me crying myself to sleep, clutching the last birthday card he'd managed to send, the one with the little cartoon puppy that said, "I'll love you forever." "How?" I turned to Sean, tears streaming down my face. "How did you?" "I've been searching for him for a year," Sean said softly. "Learned a few details about him from your mother a few months before she passed. Found him in Arizona last week through social media contacts. He had a stroke a few years back and lost his ability to walk. I drove down to get him yesterday. Wanted to surprise you for Christmas." My father reached for my hand. His fingers were thinner than I remembered, but the gentle strength in them was the same. "I never stopped looking for you, Andrea. Your mother, she made it impossible. Changed your addresses and moved so many times, but I never stopped loving you. Never stopped trying to find my little girl." I fell to my knees beside his wheelchair, sobbing as he pulled me into his arms. His cologne, the same sandalwood scent from my childhood, wrapped around me like a warm blanket. Every Christmas wish I'd ever made, every birthday candle I'd blown out, and every 11/11 I'd wished on, they'd all been for this moment. I choked out between sobs. When I saw the hotel, I thought, "Oh, sweetheart," Sean knelt beside us. "I wanted to tell you so badly, but I needed to make sure I could find him first. I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing you if it didn't work out." "I'm so sorry," I whispered to Sean later. After emotions had settled somewhat and we'd ordered room service, he pulled me close on the small sofa. "I wanted it to be perfect. Tomorrow morning, Christmas breakfast, your father walking, well, rolling in, the look on your face. It is perfect." I looked between the two men I loved most in the world. Even if I ruined the surprise, though I might have given myself a heart attack getting here. My father chuckled from his wheelchair. "You were always an impatient one. Remember how you used to shake all your Christmas presents?" "Some things never change," Sean said, squeezing my hand. "Remember the time I tried to convince you there was a fairy living in the garden?" Dad's eyes twinkled. "You left out tiny sandwiches for a week." "I'd forgotten about that." I laughed through fresh tears. "I have 26 years of stories saved up," Dad said softly. "If you want to hear them." "I want to hear everything." I reached for his hand. Every single story. I rested my head on Sean's shoulder, watching as my father began telling tales of my childhood. Stories I'd thought were lost forever. Snow fell softly outside, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring on Christmas Day. My father's eyes twinkled. "Now, who's ready to hear about the time 5-year-old Andrea decided to give our dog a haircut?" I think what we're all ready to hear, Sean said with a grin, is how Andrea jumped to conclusions and thought her loving husband was up to no good on Christmas Eve. Thank you for watching and listening. For more heartfelt stories like this, please like, subscribe, and comment.